In this ASPI analysis for the 25th of September, I want to talk about the really quite important successes which have taken place in New York in the UN Security Council over the last 24 hours. It is, I think, probably the last time in possibly 20 years an Australian Prime Minister will actually sit in a Security Council meeting as a temporary member of the Council. That is, unless Australia decides to campaign much sooner than might be expected for another Security Council position. And the Council has had, I think, a success in passing a resolution which really addresses two key areas of the counter-terrorism fight. One is to generate international resolve to defeat the financing of terrorist organisations. And it's worth reflecting that ISIL, apart from its ideological drive and its propaganda successes, is to a very large extent essentially a criminal organisation as well as a terrorist one. It's been able to amass significant volumes of money to itself through the sale of black market oil through to Turkey from Syria by imposing taxes, as they call them, but really extorting money from people in their occupied territories, and by stripping the wealth from the Bank of Mosul after they took over the town several months ago. It really is time that the international community found ways to more effectively control the flow of finances to such organisations, and that's something that the Security Council resolution will assist. The other thing that the resolution does is to put more focus on the movement of foreign fighters into conflict zones and out of conflict zones into back to home areas. I think in due course one of the things people will be asking a lot of questions about is how was it possible that ISIS was able to attract such a significant number of foreign fighters from up to 70 or 80 countries, and apparently to do so largely beneath the radar of Western intelligence organisations. It seems to me this must be considered potentially one of the most serious intelligence failures of the last few years. And I think a lot of that goes to the very successful recruitment strategies which ISIL has been able to develop online. The final thing that's worth mentioning is that the West Australian newspaper today has a very significant exclusive story about how another al-Qaeda affiliated terrorist group in Syria, known as the Khorasan Group, appears to have been able to recruit half a dozen Australians to its efforts. This was a group that the US targeted in its first series of strikes into Syria. And the story in the Western Australian has it that a number of Westerners, people carrying Western passports, were recruited by the Khorasan Group with a view to then mounting attacks against civilian airliners. Again, this is something which appears largely to have happened under the radar system of the Western intelligence community. So clear questions will have to be asked in future about what it is that made it possible for terrorist groups over the last few years to so successfully recruit from Western societies.